Hello and welcome back to MoneyLIVE APAC, the digital sessions. We are about to begin the panel discussion. Seamless, instant, connected user experience is everything in payments. This discussion will focus on how to create excellent user experiences in today's digitally led environment. So without much ado, let's meet our panelists. First up, we have Caecilia Chu. Caecilia, a very good day to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Let me tell you about Caecilia. She's the co-founder and chief executive officer at YouTrip, and it's good to have you here with us. So that was YouTrip. Next up, we've got Brad Jones. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Juliet. How are you? Pleasure to be here.
Very well, thank you. It's good to see you. Brad is the chief executive officer at Wave Money, so thank you so much for joining us. We also have Paolo Azzola. Hi.
Hi, Juliet.
Hi, good to see you. Paolo is the Chief Operating Officer at PayMaya, so thank you so much for being here. And then we have Dana Subagus. Hello.
Hello, Juliet. Thanks for having me here.
It's very good to see you. And Dana is the Head of Strategic Partnerships at Grab Indonesia. And last but not least, we have with us Urvashi Gupta. Hi, Urvashi.
Hi.
Hi, it's lovely to see you. She's the Regional Manager, Southeast Asia at Onfido. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. We're going to dive straight in. And as ever, I'm sure that you've got your own questions and comments that you want to put to our panel. So please do not feel shy about it. We want you to test them in a nice way, of course. You can send us your questions throughout the discussion using the comment box below, and we will try to get as many of those questions answered as we can in the final part of the discussion. So let's now crack on, because we're going to start by diving into the customer mindset surrounding payments. And Dana, I'd like to start first with you, because what do you sense that customers are really asking for when it comes to payments? What do they want?
Right. Thanks, Juliet. So one interesting fact is that in Indonesia, when you look at the latest report from the central bank or Bank Indonesia, in April 2020, the number of transactions, the number of online transactions actually grew by 64% year on year, while the volume grew by about 37.5% year on year. Right. So from our experience, the customer asks haven't really changed. At least that from our perspective, but it's been amplified in what is it they demand that technology provider provide. Essentially they're asking for three things. Number one is seamless experience. Number two is platform that they can trust, and the platform that can benefits them. Right. Seamless experience from the way we see it is, it's got to be easy, right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be fast. It's got to be open as well for them to transact. What I mean by open is that the technology provides variety of payment options owned by the consumer, so that they can freely choose which payment they want to use themselves, right? OVO is a super strategic partner for Grab Indonesia, and the experience that our users can have with OVO is quite seamless, where you can basically see your OVO cash and points right there on the app. And once you use all of your, OVO balance, you can just top up, and you have both online and offline top up options to make it fast and easy for you. And we also work together with MasterCard and Visa, and it essentially will take you literally 2 minutes for you to register your credit card on Grab app. And you just need to link it one time in the beginning, then you can free to use it as much as you can. So from seamless experience, I believe it's important for you to create this easy, fast, and just open ecosystem for your customers.
Okay, so what they want, in essence, hasn't really changed, as you've expressed. It has to be seamless, it has to be fast, it has to be satisfying. So let's take that a bit further, because Caecilia, what impact, if any, has COVID-19 had on the behavior of both the merchant and the consumer in terms of that payment?
Yeah. So, what we see in our data is that I think the impact of COVID-19 on digital payments has been really powerful. I think there are lots of online literature out there that you can see, the digital adoptions in terms of the whole payments has really exploded. I think during the time of the pandemic, When we actually look into the data of YouTrip, this year alone, I would say on the e-commerce usage, we have seen a 300% year-on-year growth. And on a month-on-month and also, of course, quarter-on-quarter basis, we continue to see a steady rise in terms of people shifting towards more and more e-commerce. Lots of online shopping, of course, and also online gamings. We also see lots of subscription service coming in as well. So, I actually think the COVID-19 impact has been really powerful. And I think the big questions that many of the merchants and consumers may have is this trend here to stay? So, our view is, the pandemic actually has lasted quite long, way longer than what we want it to be. But I think during this time, there is sufficient, duration for the consumer to have these habit-forming sort of experience. So, when we talk to the user, we realize that they think, it's super convenient. They're saving time. In certain occasions, they're also saving cost. So, we are a big believer that this trend is here to stay.
Okay, well, you're putting your money where your mouth is on that one, if it's really, which is quite fascinating. Because look, let's move it along there, Urvashi, because Caecilia is confident that these trends are not just a response to an abnormal situation; they're here to stay. So, given that, to what extent can customers be encouraged to adopt new cashless payment methods so that Caecilia's bet becomes a reality?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think Caecilia covered it really well, where the pandemic has massively accelerated the rate of adoption of new cashless payments. It's inevitable given, firstly, how people are in lockdown and just can't visit these places that they would transact in person. And secondly, just in terms of handling cash as well, contactless payments are something that's a lot more comfortable for people. However, again, to Caecilia's point and what our other speakers have said as well, what's really important in terms of adoption is overcoming all these barriers, such as cost barriers, where you incur additional costs to make payments via mobile, for example, cost of getting a smartphone, transaction fee. Then you have your tradition barriers, where you're changing the user's existing routine, usage barriers, which may include resistance to using mobile payments because it's inconvenient or the processing speed is low, or value barriers, where people may just be reluctant to change the way they perform their task. And an interesting example of that is, in Singapore, we have these informal restaurants that we call hawker centers. So the adoption for cashless payments has been quite stubbornly low in this space. So it'll be very interesting to see, what things are like there post the pandemic. But in terms of the four main barriers that I covered, I think, with cost barriers, that's something that's very familiar to the industry already. But I did want to touch lightly on usage barriers, and that's where we feel that companies like ours, Onfido, where we're essentially providing that element of trust when a user is transacting online by either showing them that we're verifying them in some way, either through a government ID or biometrics. So it's increasing that trust, and it's also creating that user experience where they're able to get through that journey fast to be able to be more willing to kind of continue with this consumer behavior going forward. That's where we feel that there's room for innovation as well in this race for adoption of cashless.
Okay, then let me bring in Paolo, because look, we're talking about cashless, we're looking at digital wallets, etc. But the big question must surely be, how can digital wallets create that bridge between the offline and online world of payments? And more to the point, can there be a right balance between the two?
Right, of course. And we've heard the word omni-channel for several decades now. I remember the first time I bought a flight online. It was probably in the late 90s. And I would not have been able to buy that flight if there hadn't been any online payments. Now, fast forward to now, I think there's omnichannel has really taken a different dimension. Where, for me, I walk into a store or I buy online. I want that merchant, I want that company to be able to identify me so that they know what are my preferences and what my favorite method to pay is. The second trend that I'm seeing, aside from omnichannel, especially in a country like the Philippines, and I'm sure we can find parallels with other countries around Southeast Asia, is that as a Filipino, there are two real buckets of people. There are the smartphone savvy, connected people who are comfortable to make a transaction on a mobile phone, and then there's the people who might not be as connected, might not be as smartphone enabled, and who really want to have a transaction face-to-face. And I think the stores around the Philippines, the 1.2 million retailers around the Philippines that are really part of the community, can be the bridge between the offline world and the online world for people in an emerging market like the Philippines. And I'm sure that people like Dana in Indonesia and other countries around Southeast Asia are seeing similar trends. So for me, it's number one, omni-channel. How can I make sure that a company identifies me properly and knows who I am when I walk in, so my preferences are heard? And secondly, it's how can my local community store become the gateway between the offline world and the online world?
Okay, then let me bring in Brad. But look, let's take the bigger picture on this, because what do you see as the societal and economic benefits that the online payment systems are actually bringing to the Asian communities? Because it's an exciting space, so much is happening, and you guys are leading the world.
Look, it's very exciting. I think I've been working in financial inclusion and developing markets for about 13 years now. And I think in East Asia, we're seeing really for the first time, this mass adoption, this mass acceleration of people moving into wallets. Wallets will really provide the financial services that most consumers need. But it gives the person an ability to store money safely. It gives the person an ability to send money safely. And it gives the person potentially the ability to borrow money at rates which aren't usurious and sort of not linked into local money lenders and so on. So I think, the wallet movement in markets like Philippines, like Indonesia, like Myanmar is highly exciting. And I think what we're seeing from a benefit perspective, we know from a financial inclusion perspective that when people are financially included, they're provided much better opportunities to save money, to remit money, and to borrow money, to invest in businesses, to invest in families, and so on. I think what we're seeing in Myanmar is this connection between online and offline is very interesting. And really the strength of our business has been the agent network, of which we're about 64,000 agents now. Our business started out as an over-the-counter money transfer business, and this has become a very healthy business. And what it's resulted in is our agents receiving very good commissions. And just in the first 9 months of this year, we've distributed $46 million US in commissions back to agents throughout the country. The very exciting thing in a country like Myanmar for our offline business is that 80% of our agents are women. So we have $46 million of direct economic stimulus going back into the country. And we know that when women receive this sort of money, it goes into education benefits, it goes into health, it goes into feeding kids and developing the country. So we're seeing direct societal impact through the connection of our offline and our online business. Our online business has seen massive acceleration during COVID. We just announced 1.1 million monthly active users only a couple of weeks ago. And obviously the offline business supports that business by being able to be a cash in and cash out network for offline. So in summary, Juliet, I would say the development of wallets through Southeast Asia is having a outsized effect on economic development in these countries.
Okay, then it's pretty impressive as well how it's actually changing the architecture there for the best. Now let's move on, because what I want to focus on is the strategies which are necessary to create that seamless payments experience that was alluded to in the conversation. So this is something which I'd like to throw out to all of you. If we can start first with Urvashi, then I'll roll it along. But look, how do you define a seamless payment? And on a personal level, what does it mean to you? So Urvashi, then we'll go on to Dana, and then move it amongst the rest of the panelists.
So I think how I would personally define a seamless payment is one where first of all, the instructions and the user experience is really clear and it flows. So I'm clear in terms of what I need to, what the process looks like. Let's say there's 3 steps. It's laid out clearly what I need to be providing at any point in time. And the second thing I would say is making me feel like this platform is trustworthy and safe and secure, and that I can possibly furnish my credit card details or other payment details onto this platform while knowing or feeling that they are aware who I am, and if someone else were to try and hack into my account, they have additional safeguards in place. So that's what that personally means to me.
Okay, Dana.
Yes, echoing what Urvashi was just saying, again, as I mentioned before, what we meant by seamless payment, seamless experience is the process got to be customer centric, right? It has to help the customer to get things done fast, right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be fast, and it's got to be open, because currently customers in Indonesia have different payment options, right? We have OVO, and then we have the debit cards, we have the MasterCard, and then we also have another e-wallet such as Link Aja. So it's about providing choices for the customers in what solutions or in what payment solutions they want to use to pay. And at the same time, the process is fast, and also having many use cases as well for you to use these payments, right? In Grab, we have Grab Food, in GrabMart, which are the two. GrabMart is an initiative that we're currently focusing on. So just being able to gain an access to all these different use cases and having an easy time for you to use your e-money platform to transact on it.
Okay, Caecilia.
So to us, seamless payments means it should be borderless. So, I think these days the economies are so much more interconnected, and also people have such a huge propensity to go out there, to experience new places, to see new things, and really connect with people. If I think back, one thing or one realization that I have had during this time of COVID is, I really miss traveling. I really miss going to places and get out of my home to really interact with a real person. So, I would say building out that cross-border, borderless payment infrastructure and product to us is truly meaningful.
Okay, Brad.
Without repeating any of the very good points here the panelists have made, I'd just add two. I would say free, and I would say interoperable. And the reason I say those two things is that what we made P2P free about 12 months ago in our market, and we obviously we saw along with COVID, we saw a significant rise in transactions. So in digital transactions compared to the same period last year of March to September, we saw an 800% increase. And I think making payments free was a big part of that by reducing the friction. I think secondly, interoperability. I mean, in this market now, we have 14 different wallets and none of them are interoperable. I think the opportunity when I can make an interoperable payment to other providers or use the issuing and acquiring network of another provider is really an opportunity for seamless payments and also to really scale the payment system in the country.
Okay, and finally, Paolo.
Yeah, I think taking a step back and understanding what a consumer wants when he walks into a merchant or goes onto a website, and what a merchant really wants from a payments provider. I think it really is about me as a consumer walking into a QSR, a quick service restaurant, or a grocery store. I shouldn't really be thinking about what payment method does the merchant accept. I should be able to pay with whatever is in my pocket at that time, whether it's a phone, whether it's a credit card, a debit card, or a local wallet, or an international wallet. That's the approach that we've really taken from the consumer side, is let's be as open as possible. And that's how we built what we call an open loop, of course. Now, on the merchant side, it's pretty much the same thing. If my customer walks through the door, it shouldn't really matter which wallet or which card that person wants to pay with. I should be able to offer every payment method to the customer. That's what creates a seamless payment experience. I don't have to go and download a new payment method, or I don't have to go and get a new credit card or debit card in order to go to that merchant and feel like I have been included or excluded. So the goal for us really was to have, and I think we were the first wallet that I know of that really tried to build both the e-wallet on the one hand, but also the enterprise payment acceptance platform on the other hand. And that's something that we think is quite unique and very, very powerful. As a merchant, we integrate once, we have every payment method that is relevant to them and to their customers. And I think that really creates the seamless payment experience.
Okay, so quite a few elements overlap there from your different visions. Great ideas, but Caecilia, the challenge has to be creating that seamless experience for the customer. I mean, what are the main challenges and how do you overcome them?
Yeah, so with the main vision of building out the borderless cross-border payments product. So the biggest challenge we see has been the fragmented regulatory regimes and also the huge amount of localization required to actually expand in a region like Southeast Asia. So every country probably has its own language, its own user behavior, its own user preference, different infrastructure, and of course the regulatory regimes are all, there are overlaps and similarities, but I would say, the localization is still important. So I would say, that is actually one of the key, I would say challenge in this region. It's the regulatory regimes fragmentation, but I would also say that kind of high entry barrier also represents opportunities, particularly for local regional players like ourselves, as opposed to, let's say, foreign players who try to crack into this region. I see that local players, regional players have huge advantage over them.
And Brad, to what extent do you think can omni-channel and multi-platform services actually improve the customer payment experience so that it does fulfill those objectives?
Yeah, I think if I look at Southeast Asia, one of the fascinating things about Southeast Asia for the fintech industry is the smartphone proliferation. And really what that's enabled is us to really build on a platform that's very different to, say, what's happened in East Africa. We've built research teams, design teams, developer teams to really make sure that the app experience is as good as possible for customers, at the same time building out use cases. I think for us then, the agent network is a key channel, and it's a channel we use for acquisition. It's a channel we use for ease for customers to cash in and cash out. And I think really the development of the agent network for us will continue to grow and continue to be able to actually offer those customers those services. The third element of our omni-channel experience is really our customer service, and this is an area that has actually had to have huge growth during COVID. And we're looking into 2021 and beyond to try and create a far better experience for customers using the app as a channel for service as well as transactions. So I think for us, we look at those channels jointly, and we look at the business jointly, and actually we track the customer experience throughout each of those channels to try and make it as seamless as possible. So I think for us, taking an omni-channel approach is a very important thing. But I think we've all got a fantastic opportunity in Southeast Asia as we start to move into the unbanked, is because most of them do have a smartphone, or an increasing number have a smartphone, and that really is the underpinning anchor for us to build this omni-channel experience around.
And Paolo, from an operational perspective, what do you see as the necessary requirements to create that seamless, instant and real-time payments, the structure which customers want?
Well, I think I mentioned a little bit about it earlier, where it has to be that a customer doesn't need to think about which payment method is accepted at which merchant. It should really be a full open loop and a full interoperability between different players within a single country. I would say the other thing is that I think is critical is what authentication method do we need for what type of payment? If we're making a $1 or $2 equivalent payment, then the level of authentication needs to be easy enough for it to be a seamless transaction, or something that I barely even have to think about the fact that I'm making a payment right now. If, on the other hand, you're making a $200 or $300 payment, then at that point, the level of authentication needs to be a lot more stringent. And that, I think, is the key, is how can you make sure that a person's money is being spent at the right place or where they want it to be spent, therefore making it secure, but at the same time without killing the experience, so to say. So that, I think, is a key, and we think that we've really got it right in terms of which payment types really need a second layer of authentication, and which ones really should be as easy as breathing.
And this is quite interesting, because this is where Urvashi comes into the conversation, because look, you can talk about biometrics, you can talk about facial recognition and the Internet of all things powering these invisible payments. But look, to get the vision that Paolo is looking for, that you can just walk in somewhere and it doesn't matter what's in your pocket, the system is built to take it. How can you construct that technology so that it makes those payments more convenient? Because that's what Paolo's getting at. It is the convenience in the system.
Absolutely. And I think Paolo said it really well. How are you managing the risk with the appropriate amount of friction that you're creating in the user experience such that you're not making it really painful? Or if you are making it painful, it's because the risk is at par with what you're putting the user through. But to give you one example of what Paolo mentioned, right? So one way we see Onfido's technology being used a lot by customers, of course, we have the typical onboarding flow, right? Where a user takes a picture of their ID, takes a selfie, we verify them, we say that we're checking something that they own, which is their ID. We're checking something that they are, which is their face. So that's it, we've established the person's identity. Now, many times, an e-wallet user may suddenly want to increase their transaction limit from, say, $100 to $1,000. Now, this is risky. So what Onfido, vendors like ours allow companies to do is then say, all right, fine, this user is allowed to increase their transaction limit, but ask them to quickly capture a selfie. So Onfido can then match this selfie with the selfie that was taken at the point of onboarding to confirm that this user is accessing their own account and it hasn't been, it hasn't fallen in the hands of a fraudster. And then that result comes back within seconds, and suddenly the user gets access to their account again. Now, the added convenience is you're not having to upload a passport or an ID again. You're not having to take a picture of your ID. You're simply taking a picture of something that's with you no matter where you go, which is your face in our case. So that's one great example. And another example in terms of how it can make payments seamless and convenient is a growing use case for us is the buy now, pay later companies, right? So a lot of times users find themselves in a store and say they want to buy a washing machine. Now, they might not want to pay up front $1,000 for the washing machine. So you have loads of players like Klarna and the buy now, pay laters in the region, pay later players in the region as well, where users can just sign up for an account with these companies while in line, get approved within a couple of minutes, and complete the transaction by the time they reach the checkout counter, which is a transaction that the store would have lost if not for this quick ability to apply and get approved for a loan within minutes.
Yeah, that's a great example of how the whole process can work to actually make things more efficacious from the customer perspective. But look, let's just close off this section by throwing a question there to Dana, because look, what I'd like to know from your perspective is how can digital wallet and payment players actually move beyond just offering payment services and also deliver value-added services? Because at the end of the day, the job is to keep the customer engaged. You keep them engaged, they stay loyal.
Right. So beyond payment services, we really need to understand our customer needs for financial services, especially on how they use technology to adapt to this new normal, right? Brings back to our previous discussion that we see the customer ask doesn't really change, which is what you touch so frequently upon, is the seamless experience. They also want a platform they can trust, but also a platform that provides the maximum amount of benefits for them, right? And therefore, when you think about what is the next beyond payment services, it's something along those lines, right? For example, rewards in terms of giving additional benefits for our customers, right? Rewards, what do customers get in return when they're making those payments? In Indonesia, we recently just merged our Grab reward system with OVO points. And you know why it's very powerful is because OVO is also utilized by Tokopedia, which is one of the largest e-commerce platform in Indonesia as well. So what that creates is a full ecosystem where if you transact using OVO in Grab, in Tokopedia, or in one of the 700,000 offline merchants of OVO, you get the same currency which you can spend in any of those platforms, right? Which is very good benefits from for our users, because it's like me maybe buying something with cash and then getting some change in return. You can sort of just collect these changes and then use it for later use, right? So that's one area. Another area that we see growing quite significantly is in insurance, right? Because during COVID, customer wants to be protected. They want to have extra security. So insurance is also a great case beyond payments for financial services. We recently also have launched our micro insurance, which is the hospital product, hospital cash cover. now consumers, in addition to buying all your everyday needs from transport, food, mart, and everything else, now you can also buy insurance on Grab app for as low as 9,900 rupiah per month, right? And many Indonesians can't afford regular insurances, so this hospitalization micro insurance can really make a difference for many families, right? And beyond keeping customers engaged, there's also an important factor which also already touched briefly by the others is financial inclusion. Financial inclusion in Indonesia. Financial inclusion is a big mission for Grab in Indonesia. And just recently on November 10, we just announced our investment in Link Aja. Link Aja is an electronic wallet supported by state-owned enterprises in Indonesia. And Grab is Link Aja's first investor from a private and major technology company. And this is an important strategic partnership for us. Link Aja choose Grab as their first private technology investor because they believe that together we can really work together to accelerate financial inclusion and bring financial benefits to millions of Indonesians who are currently unbanked, right? So beyond comments, I actually would like to say that, in addition to helping our customers adapting to this new normal, we can also do good, right? Do good things by, helping Indonesians and contribute to the overall economic growth by accelerating financial inclusion.
Let me jump in fact, because you referenced there that investment into Link Aja, and in fact it's popped up in one of the questions, and this is quite a nice segue to get into those audience questions in the time that we have available. So I'm going to throw them out there to all of you. It doesn't really matter who answers. If you're hesitant, I'm going to select somebody, so beware. But look, we've had one question which has come through. Financial inclusion has historically been hard to be profitable. Will this ever change? What are local governments doing to contribute to financial inclusion? So 2 questions in one, really. Who'd like to tackle them?
I can address the first part of the question, if you like. Yeah, so I mean, we're quite unusual in that we're a profitable fintech. So we monetized over-the-counter money transfer. And when I say our payments are free, P2P payments are free, but we do charge for money transfer. And that's become a very profitable business for us. And it's enabled us to really take the earnings from that business, as well as the additional investment that we're getting from the investment by Ant Group into Wave Money, and to put that into the digital side of the business. So we see sort of a number of different revenue streams emerging whilst we drive this financial inclusion approach. We see data monetization, we see advertising services, we see lending potentially. We see all these opportunities for future digital monetization. And then what we're looking to do is that as the OTC business will probably start to plateau or decline over time, we'll have replaced that revenue with revenues from the digital business. So that's been the approach we've taken. We broke even within 2 years of launch, and have remained profitable ever since. So it is possible.
Okay, you're doing something right. Would anybody else like to respond to that question?
Yes, Juliet. I think payments businesses need to stand on their own 2 feet to start with. Otherwise, it's very difficult to attract the right type of investors and ultimately the right type of customers. I believe in what Brad's saying. I think if you can actually get your business to be somewhat profitable, and if you can actually have a transaction that is being paid for by the right party, in our case, in most cases, it'll be a merchant rather than a consumer, then at that point, your payments business can actually be successful in its own right. Then if you overlay on top of that, of course, with the data that you're getting on customers, on merchants, on various parties, if you overlay on top of that financial services that are more profitable than payments or higher margin than payments, like lending, insurance, and so on, then at that point, your business can be extremely attractive. So that's something we really believe in. And to your point about government, I think it's in the Philippines where we've been very lucky with government, both at the central bank side, but also at the national and local government side, really pushing for cashless payments to become a driving force of how the economy is being run. So the Philippines, I think, is in quite a positive spot when it comes to that. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. When I arrived in the Philippines in 2014, I think the number was around 1% of transactions were being done electronically. Now we are nearing 20%. And by the year 2023, the government and the BSP, the central bank, are expecting to have 50% of payments being done electronically. So the numbers are really going in the right direction. The momentum is there for cashless payments to take over.
Okay then. Would anyone else like to respond, or should we move on to the next question? Let's move on to the next question. This has come through from Elizabeth Ong, who's a lecturer at the Trinity University of Asia. Is there an industry that cashless payment would not be feasible? Off the cuff, I'm thinking of the real estate because of the huge amount of money that needs to be monitored. So Dana, I saw you nodding in response to that, which means that you're going to address it first, and then we'll roll it along amongst the other panelists.
Yeah, well, I agree with the answer, right? I believe cashless payments will be embraced. You know, it really depends on the ticket size, right? The bigger the ticket size, the more difficult it is for you to facilitate the payments, right? But where cashless payments will definitely flourish is in the everyday use cases where the ticket size is still not so big, so that it's easier for compliance perspective as well.
Okay, would anybody else like to add to that question from Elizabeth Ong about the feasibility of cashless payments? She was looking at the real estate sector because you've got large cash transactions there. Would anyone like to tackle that? Yeah,
I mean, I would hope in most markets, housing settlements aren't being done by cash. And they are in Myanmar. But in most markets, I'd say they are digitally done. So I think really what this is really a battle against cash. And you just need to look at every single cash transaction and see, can it be replaced? And I would say, settlement for housing absolutely can be replaced because that's what the banking system is there for. And then the other payments that we're picking up are really a lot of the micro payments, which are all, traditionally done in cash. So I would say pretty much any sector can be digitized.
Would anyone else like to respond to that? There's quite an interesting phrase there, the battle against cash. It was, whatever it was, it certainly stood out. I mean, Caecilia, would you like to respond to what you've heard just now from Brad and also to that question?
Yeah, so I agree to Brad. I also think that over the medium to long run, I think most of the sectors can use digital payments in a meaningful way. I think along the way to get there, there are a couple sectors that I think, whether it's wallet players or as a digital finance company, I think we tend to be a lot more cautious. Would be those that has high money laundering and CFT risk. So I think as part of as a wallet that looks for growth, we are also the party who is also responsible to manage risk. So there are a couple segments that we have intentionally stay away, whether it's online gambling, certain sites that are geared towards investments, or even some of the, I guess, a little bit more, under-regulated charity sites. So I would say, eventually I would think that all of them can use digital payments in a very meaningful way. It's just that our way to get there, I think it needs to be in a controlled and well-managed manner.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it on that sound note because sadly, as ever, time is our enemy. But a big thank you there to our panelists. It's been a really interesting session. And also thanks to you, Urvashi, from Onfido for joining us, because it's worth actually visiting their hub. If you want to find out more about the company, then please go onto their platform homepage and you can find out all about them, initiate those conversations. And don't forget as well that you can also meet your fellow attendees and keep the conversation going here on the platform. Plenty has been thrown out in this discussion so far. All you need to do is head to the networking tab to start a conversation. But before we move on to our next panel, I want to bring in our pundit, Andrea. Andrea, are you there? Can you? Excellent, yeah. Excellent. I mean, look, that was so fascinating. And what you can really see is the move towards the cashless society, but also making sure that you have these multiple platforms that people can use and they can really enjoy that seamless transaction experience. It was fascinating.
Absolutely. I think for me, the main takeaway, I think that it keeps popping up, right, is the idea of customer centricity, right? And when you look at it from a perspective of what Paolo was saying, getting into the merchant or on a site and not having to think which mean to pay with, or if you flip it on the other side and you look at unbanked population and the fact that someone is using cash because doesn't have any other way to pay, the thing that is obvious and is popping up all over again is the fact that the app, the simple ability to have a phone, is the common denominator, because that's what basically helps across. So it's what solves the underbanked point, is what solves the seamless entry point into payments. And an application and mobile phone adoption is basically the game changer here. And I think I'm really also quite excited about what the panelists have been sharing, especially Brad in the last piece, and also Dana before him, about the idea that payments is by solving for user experience are getting on top of the user, top of mindness, but then integration with third-party potentially providers or partnerships of, let's say, lending, insurances, and other fintech can then bring monetization and profitability. Obviously, someone is already being able to achieve it without that, as Brad shared with us, but that's not for everybody, and most likely payments will still stay a low margin business, but there are ways to complement that.
From your experience, do you think that all customers actually appreciate digital initiatives in the same way?
It's a use case specific, right? I mean, finance is moving towards, and I think the panelists have shared that broadly, is moving from a horizontal type of infrastructure play towards use case embedded finance play, where basically users are doing something, and while doing that, they are getting into payments. The typical phrase, no one is gonna get into a bank branch anymore, right? The idea is, while you do something in your day-to-day life, you happen to transact, and I think it's quite true.
Okay, then. Look, we're going to have to leave it there for the moment, Andre. I know that you're going to be joining us a little bit later, but fascinating insights that we've had from our panel, and indeed the panel preceding this. But that's all we've got time for at the moment. But we do have 5 minutes until our final panel. So please do remember to use the time to join the networking area. That's where you'll be able to send someone a direct message and also book those one-to-one meetings. Don't forget as well to visit the sites belonging to Salesforce, Onfido, Episode 6 or Jumio, and find out how they can help you in your digital transformation journeys. They're on hand, ready and willing to talk. Also, there is the live poll on screen. We'd love to hear from you on that so that we can reveal the results, or you can use the break to, well, take a cup of coffee, grab yourself a snack, whatever. But either which way, we're going to be taking a look at payment infrastructures and cross-border payments in 5 minutes. So get yourself spruced up, because we'll be back in 5. And don't forget as well to send in your questions, see how the panel gets on with them. See you in a bit.